Clara Whitcomb stood in the middle of Mercy Creek with a travel trunk at her feet and a torn marriage letter shaking in her hand, while the man who had ordered her west refused to step off the hotel porch. Dust clung to the hem of her brown dress. A train whistle cried behind her like it was ashamed to leave her there. "I asked for a bride, not a beggar," Silas Vane said, loud enough for the whole street to hear. Clara's face went white, but she did not weep. Then a poor cowboy rancher named Eli Mercer, who had only ridden into town for flour, coffee, and nails, stopped his wagon beside her and saw the hunger she was trying to hide. "Before we begin, leave your country name below and tell me where this western night is reaching you. Subscribe if stories of rejected brides, protective cowboys, and hard-earned love keep you listening." The town of Mercy Creek had a way of gathering around trouble faster than flies found spilled molasses. One moment the boardwalk had been half empty, just a barber sweeping hair out his door, and two boys rolling a wagon wheel through the dust. The next moment every window seemed to hold a face. Every hitching rail had a man leaning on it, and every church woman with a basket on her arm had slowed down to listen. Clara Whitcomb stood where the stage road met the depot platform, with a trunk too heavy for her thin arms and a letter that had been handled so many times its creases were soft as cloth. She had read that letter all the way from St. Louis. She had read it under soot-dark lamps beside coughing women with babies, and once by the gray dawn light when the train crossed country so empty she thought the whole world had forgotten to finish making it. The letter had promised a home. It had promised honest marriage. It had promised that Mr. Silas Vane of Mercy Creek, Colorado Territory, required a respectable wife with steady hands, a good heart, and no taste for fancy living. Clara had not been fancy for a long time. Fancy had gone away with her mother's silver combs, then the parlor rug, then the last black dress she owned when her father's death swallowed the house and left only his name behind. So she had answered the letter. She had sewn up her one good dress. She had sold her mother's teacups for the fair, and when the agency woman told her a man out west would be grateful for a bride who knew hunger and could still stand straight, Clara believed her. Now the man stood on the porch of the Golden Lantern Hotel, with his tunes hooked in his vest, looking her over as though she were a cracked plate delivered to the wrong table. Silas Vane was not old, but he had the soft, satisfied look of a man who had never split his own wood. His boots were polished. His beard was trimmed square. Behind him stood Mrs. Vale, the hotel keeper's wife, whose mouth looked made for pinching. Beside her was a young woman in a blue dress who kept hiding a smile behind her glove. "You are Miss Clara Whitcomb?" Silas asked, though he had already read her name off the letter. "I am," Clara said. "And you came by the marriage agreement sent through Mrs. Bell, correspondence office?" "Yes, sir." Silas lifted the letter she had handed him, gave it a little shake, and turned so the porch could hear him better. "This letter says you are 23. I was 23 in April. What you share? I says, you come from a good family. My father was once a bookkeeper. Was once." Silas smiled without warmth. "And where is the dowry mentioned here?" Clara blinked. "Dowry." A murmur passed along the street. Dowry was a heavy word in a poor town. It made some people curious and others mean. Silas tapped the paper. "The agency wrote that your father left a small settlement to be brought with you for household establishment." Clara felt the first true cold of the day move through her. "There is no settlement. I wrote plain. I have no money beyond what brought me here." Mrs. Vale made a quiet sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a cough. The girl in blue whispered something and turned her face away. Silas looked down at Clara's trunk. "Then there has been a mistake." "A mistake can be corrected," Clara said, though her voice had gone soft. "Not this one." Silas folded the letter. "I need a wife who can help secure my business standing. I was told you had means, good dresses, and proper connections back east. You arrive with one trunk and a dress fit for washing floors. Clara's cheeks burned, but she did not lower her eyes. That made some people dislike her more. Shame was supposed to bend a woman's neck. When it did not, folks called it pride. I came in good faith, she said. You came poor? Silas answered. There is a difference. No one moved. At the edge of the street, a freight wagon creaked to a stop. The horses were rangy and dust-caked, the wagon bed mostly empty except for sacks of flour, a tin coffee pot, a bundle of nails, lamp oil, and a coil of wire. The man holding the reins had a hat worn pale by weather and a coat with one elbow patched in a darker cloth. He was lean the way of men who work more than they ate, with sun-brown hands and eyes the color of creek stones after rain. Eli Mercer had not meant to hear a woman broken in public. He had ridden in from the north pasture before sunrise, leading two horses that needed shoeing and counting coins twice in his pocket. Flour first, he had told himself. Coffee if there was enough left. Nails only because the barn door hung crooked and winter wind did not care whether a man had money. Then he saw Clara. He saw the torn hem she had tried to mend. He saw how she held herself still, not because she felt no fear, but because fear had already taken all it could from her. He saw her swallow once, quick and dry, when the smell of hot biscuits drifted from the hotel kitchen, and he saw, most of all, that her hands were not soft. They were clean, but the knuckles were red from work, the nails trimmed short, one finger wrapped in a narrow strip of cloth, where a needle had likely gone in deep. A woman who could survive shame without turning cruel was not the kind of woman Mercy Creek ought to throw into the road. Silas turned as Eli stepped down from the wagon. Something you need, Mercer? Only came for supplies, Eli said. Then buy them and go. Eli looked at Clara not as a man looks at a bargain, and not as a man looks at gossip. He looked at her like she was a person standing too long in the sun. Ma'am, he said, taking off his hat. Have you eaten today? The question was plain. It was also the kindest thing anyone had asked her since she stepped off the train. Clara's mouth opened, but pride and hunger fought inside her. Hunger nearly won. I am all right, she said. That was when her knees gave just enough to betray her. She caught herself on the trunk handle, but the streets saw it. Silas saw it too, and his lip curled. Eli stepped closer, stopping far enough away not to crowd her. There's a mercantile 2 doors down. Mrs. Pike sells beans and bread. I'll buy you a plate. I cannot accept charity, if I'm asking you to keep me from eating alone. Someone snickered. Eli did not look around. Silas said, You do not want to involve yourself, Mercer. That woman came under a false claim. She came by letter, Eli said. A letter with your name on it, based on lies. Then someone lied to her too. The murmurs changed. That was the trouble with truth. It could turn and bite the hand that pointed it. Silas stepped down one porch stair. You calling me dishonest? No, Eli said. Calm as water under ice. I'm saying a woman doesn't spend her last dollar crossing half the country unless she believes the words written to her. Mrs. Vale snapped. And what do you know of brides by letter, Eli Mercer? Your own house can barely hold heat. A few men laughed because it was true enough. Eli's ranch, the old Mercy place, had once run cattle wide across 3 ridges. Now it sat with sagging fences, a barn roof patched in shakes and prayer, and a kitchen stove that smoked when the wind turned wrong. His father's sickness had eaten the savings. A spring flood had taken 12 calves. His sister Ruth had died, bringing her little girl Lily into the world. And Eli had been raising the child ever since with hands made for ribbons, not ribbons. He knew poor. He knew being measured and found wanting. That was why he did not flinch. My house has a roof, he said. "It has a stove. It has work enough for two and a child who needs supper same as anyone. If Miss Whitcomb needs a place to sit while this letter gets sorted, she can sit there." Clara stared at him. "I do not know you." "No, ma'am," he said. "And you shouldn't trust me just because I spoke up. But I can drive you to Mrs. Pike's boarding room, or to the preacher's wife, or to my ranch where my niece and an old hired woman keep house. You choose. Nobody here gets to choose for you." That quiet offering changed something in her face. Not relief. Not yet. Relief required safety, and she had not had enough of it to recognize its shape. But the tightness at her mouth softened. Silas laughed. "Take her, then. A poor rancher and a rejected bride. That sounds like a fit made by hunger." Eli put his hat back on. "Hunger teaches folks not to waste what is good." The street went silent. Clara looked from Silas to the hotel porch, then to the trunk at her feet. The train behind her hissed, ready to leave. It would not take her back without money. The hotel would not give her a room without payment. Mercy Creek had already named her before she could defend herself. Rejected. Sent by letter. Poor. Unwanted. Eli did not touch her trunk until she nodded. When she did, he lifted it into the wagon as if it weighed nothing, though it was heavier than it looked. Clara climbed onto the wagon seat with her spine straight, her hands folded hard in her lap. Eli bought flour, beans, coffee, a wedge of cheese, and a loaf of day-old bread from Mrs. Pike while the town washed through windows. Before leaving, he handed Clara the bread, wrapped in brown paper. "For the road," he said. She held it like a fragile thing. "I will repay you." "I expect you will," he answered. "But not today." As the wagon rolled out of Mercy Creek, the church bell struck noon, and the sound followed them past the smithy, past the last hitching rail, past the signboard where wanted posters curled in the wind. Clara did not look back until the town had shrunk behind dust. When she finally did, Eli heard her breathe out. It was not a sob. It was the sound of a woman refusing to break where others could enjoy it. The North Road climbed slow into open country. Prairie grass moved in long silver waves under the wind, and the mountains stood far off with snow along their shoulders. Eli drove without pressing her to speak. He had learned long ago that silence could be a mercy if a person offered it clean. Clara ate only half the bread at first, taking careful bites as though someone might accuse her of greed. Eli pretended not to notice. After a mile, he reached behind the seat, broke a corner from the cheese, and set it between them on the wagon board. "Goes better with bread," he said. She stared at it, then at him. "You cannot keep feeding every stranger who is insulted in Mercy Creek." "No, Mom. Only the ones who nearly faint by my wagon." A small sound escaped her. It might have become a laugh if life had not chained it to stop halfway. He liked that sound, then warned himself not to like it too much. A woman humiliated before a town did not need a man building dreams around her while the dust was still settling. The Mercer Ranch came into view near sundown. It sat in a shallow valley where cottonwoods bent over a narrow creek. The house was 2 rooms deep with a lean-to kitchen, gray boards, and a porch that leaned a little toward the earth. A barn stood beyond it, patched with mismatched lumber. There were chickens scratching near the woodpile, 3 milk cows in a rail pen, and a small girl in a faded red shawl standing on the porch with a wooden spoon in her hand like a sword. The girl was 6 years old, slight as a reed, with dark curls cut uneven and eyes too solemn for a child. "Uncle Eli," she called. "Miss Willa says if you forgot coffee, you can sleep in the barn." "I remember," Eli said. An older woman appeared behind the child, wiping her hands on her apron. Willa Pike was not truly kin, but she had worked for Eli's mother before marrying, burying, and returning to the ranch when Ruth died. She had a sharp tongue, a bent back, and the tenderest hands in 3 counties. Her gaze moved over Clara once, taking in the town dust, the travel trunk, the pale exhaustion, and the letter clutched in one hand. Mercy Creek done something ugly again? Willa asked. Yes, Eli said. I figure. Clara rose from the wagon seat too quickly and swayed. Eli's hand moved, then stopped before touching her. Willa saw that too. Come in, girl, Willa said. There's stew. You can wash first if you like, or eat first if you're wise. Clara's eyes filled then, not from the insult in town, but from the ordinary kindness of being told she had choices. I do not wish to trouble you. Trouble knocks louder, Willa said. You barely tap. Inside, the kitchen smelled of beef bones, onions, wood smoke, and coffee. The room was poor but clean. A rag rug lay before the stove. A blue cup had been mended with wire. The table had 4 chairs. The one had a broken spindle. In the corner, a small bed had been made up with a quilt faded almost white. Lily watched Clara from behind Willa's skirt. Eli brought in the trunk and set it near the wall. Miss Whitcomb, this is Willa Pike and my niece, Lily Mercer. Lily, mind your manners. Lily studied Clara. Were you crying? Lily, Eli warned gently. Clara knelt so the movement cost her after the long travel. Not just now. Were you hungry? Clara glanced toward Eli, then back at the child. Children were dangerous because they asked straight what adults buried under lace. Ice, Clara said. A little. Lily came forward and put the wooden spoon in Clara's hand. You can stir. Stirring helps when your stomach is loud. Clara closed her fingers around the spoon. Thank you. That was how she entered Eli Mercer's home. Not as a bride, not as a burden, as a woman standing beside a stove, stirring stew, while a child watched with grave approval. They ate by lantern light. Eli bowed his head and said grace in a quiet voice that did not show off for company. Clara listened to him thank the Lord for safe travel, warm food, and hands willing to help one another through the day. Her throat tightened at that, but she kept her face down until she trusted it. After supper, she insisted on washing the dishes. Willa tried to wave her off, but Clara took off her cuffs, rolled her sleeves, and set to work with such steady purpose that Willa finally let her. She ain't lazy, Willa murmured to Eli near the stove. I saw that. You also saw she's half-starved. I saw that too. And pretty, Eli frowned. Willa, what? I got eyes, even if mine are old. Clara heard none of it. She was washing a cracked bowl with both hands, her mind fixed on the simple blessing of warm water. When the dishes were done, she turned to Eli. I should tell you plainly, she said. I cannot pay room or board tonight. I have $2.07, and I owe some of that to the woman who lent me a shawl in Kansas City. Eli leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. Then don't pay tonight. I am not accustomed to being kept in work, Willa said. Lord knows there's plenty. Clara straightened. I can sew, cook simple meals, keep accounts, wash men, read aloud, and tend children, if they are patient with me. Lily, sitting near the stove, said, I am patient sometimes. We can use mending. The books are a mess. Lily needs letters. Willa needs help before she works herself into the grave and comes back to scold us from it. Willa snorted. I do it too. Clara's fingers twisted in her apron. And in exchange, food, Eli said. I bed in the corner until we find a better answer. Protection enough that Silas Vane can't say you were left in the row. Protection, the word, landed heavy. Clara had been offered marriage, employment, advice, pity, and judgment. Protection was different. It sounded like a door closing against wind. I will not marry you for it, she said quickly, then flushed at her own bluntness. Eli's expression did not change, except for a little sadness around the eye. I didn't ask. No, forgive me. I only meant. I know what you meant. He took his hat from the peg. A woman ought to hear a man say what he is and is not asking. I'm offering work and shelter, nothing else. The relief that moved through her was so strong, it nearly weakened her knees again. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer. Eli is fine if you want Clara then." He nodded once. Clara. That night, long after Lily slept, and Willa's soft snore came from the next room, Clara lay in the corner bed under the faded quilt and listened to the ranch breathe. The wind pressed at the walls. A horse stamped in the barn. Somewhere outside, Eli walked the yard with slow steps, checking latches, banking the water trough against freezing, making certain the house was safe, without ever announcing that he did so. Clara pulled the quilt to her chin. She had come west to be chosen by a man who rejected her before strangers. Instead, she had been seen by a man who asked whether she had eaten. That was not love. She knew better than to name it that. But in the darkness of the poor ranch house, with stew warm in her stomach and the first clean pillow beneath her cheek in days, Clara let herself believe it might be the beginning of being human again. Morning did not treat guests delicately at the Mercer Ranch. It arrived cold, gray, and full of chores. Clara woke to the sound of wood splitting and Lily whispering to a doll made of corn husks. For one confused moment, she thought she was back in the cheap room above the laundry in St. Louis, where wagons rattled before dawn, and the woman downstairs shouted for girls to hurry. Then she smelled coffee, real coffee, thin but honest. She opened her eyes and saw the stove glowing red. Willa stood at the table kneading biscuit dough. If she meant to prove useful, there's an apron on the peg. Clara rose at once. "Yes, ma'am. Don't mind me before coffee. Makes me feel ancient." Within an hour, Clara had tied on the apron, fed the stove, swept ash from the hearth, and braided Lily's hair into 2 neat plaits. Lily touched the braids with wonder. "Uncle Eli makes knots," she said. "Yes, Clara replied, "but braids hold prettier." Eli came in carrying a pail of milk, his hat dusted with frost. He stopped when he saw Lily's hair. Something passed over his face, tender and pained at once. "Your mama used to braid it that way," he said. Lily looked down. "I don't remember." "No," Eli said softly. "I reckon not." Clara felt she had stepped onto sacred ground without meaning to. She turned to the stove, busying herself with cups. Breakfast was biscuits, gravy thin enough to show the plate, and coffee Willa called strong, even though Clara could see the bottom of her cup. Still, it was warm, and warmth had become a kind of riches. After the meal, Eli brought a stack of shirts to the table. "These need mending, but it can wait." Clara picked up the top shirt. One sleeve had been patched twice and torn again. "It has waited long enough." He looked embarrassed. "There are fence rails down in the east lot. Cattle don't wait for sowing. I will sow while Lily reads." "She don't read much yet." "Then she will read more by supper." Lily groaned, but not like she meant it. By noon, Clara had made a school out of the kitchen table. She wrote letters on scrap paper with a pencil stub. Lily leaned close, sounding them out, her tongue peeking from one corner of her mouth. Between lessons, Clara mended shirts, counted jars in the pantry, and asked Willa where the account book was kept. Willa pointed to a shelf with the air of a woman directing someone to a grave. "There. May the Lord protect you." The account book was worse than Clara expected. Eli kept numbers honestly, but not neatly. Feed costs ran into shoeing costs. A payment owed from a neighbor was written beside a recipe for cough syrup. There were 3 different columns for store credit, all bad. Clara studied the pages until her brow tightened. "You look like you found a snake," Willa said. "Not a snake, a leak." "Money?" "Yes, small leaks sink boats too." When Eli returned in the afternoon, cold and mud to the knees, Clara had copied the debts into clean columns. She had listed what was owed, what was due, what could wait, and what must not. He stood over the book, silent. "I did not mean to pry," Clara said. "You didn't pry. I handed you the mess." You are paying interest on flour bought 3 months ago. I know. And Mr. Vale at the hotel charges you 2 cents more per pound than Mrs. Pike does. I didn't know that. He also added a lantern wick twice. Elias' jaw tightened. Vale keeps Silas Vane's accounts too. Clara looked up. Does he? Half the town owes one or both of them. There it was, the first thread tying her shame to something larger. Silas had not merely rejected her. He had done it from a porch owned by a man who profited from people having nowhere else to go. Clara closed the book. Then you must not buy from him again unless there is no choice. Eli almost smiled. You give orders gentle, but they still sound like orders. I have had employment where gentle orders were the only kind a woman could survive giving. That made him look at her more closely. What employment? She smoothed her skirt. Laundry, sewing, copying letters for a lawyer after his clerk took ill. Before that, I helped my father with accounts. And before that, there had been a house with green shutters, a mother who sang while setting the table, a father whose ink-stained fingers smelled of tobacco and peppermint. Before that, there had been Sunday gloves, books in the parlor, and the foolish certainty that respectable people could not fall through the floor of the world. Clara folded her hands. Before that is gone. Eli did not push. Instead, he nodded toward the account book. Can you teach me to keep it proper? Yes, then. You've already earned your supper. Outside, a hard wind began dragging clouds across the sky. By late afternoon, snow mixed with dust in a mean, stinging whirl. Eli went to bring in a calf that had slipped through a broken rail. Clara watched from the kitchen window as he crossed the yard with a rope in one hand, shoulders bent against weather. He works like a man trying to pay a debt to the debtor, she said, without meaning to speak aloud. Willa, shelling beans near the stove. Pause. Clara turned. Forgive me. No need. It's true. Willa dropped beans into the bowl one by one. His father died owing money. His mother died tired. His sister, Ruth, came home, carrying Lily after the man she married ran off toward California. Ruth took fever after birthing the child. Eli married her up on the rise. He was 24 and had a baby in one arm and creditors at the gate. Clara watched Eli catch the calf and lift it bodily over the rail, then stand a moment with one hand on the post as though gathering strength. He never married, came close once, Willa said. Girl from town, pretty as a painted dish. She liked him when the Mercer Ranch still sounded grand. When the money thinned, she married a banker's cousin in Denver. Clara looked down. That is cruel. That's people. No, Clara said quietly. People can choose. Willa studied her with new approval. Yes, girl, they can. That evening, Eli came in, soaked to the skin. Clara had his patched coat warming near the stove before he asked. When he reached for it, she stopped him. It is wet through. Wear this until it dries. She held out the shawl a Kansas City woman had lent her. It was brown wool, too small for his shoulders and worn at the edge. Eli looked at it, then at her. That's yours, and now it is keeping you from catching fever. He took it because refusing would make her charity, and accepting made it practical. The shawl looked near ridiculous around him, and Lily giggled until Willa told her to mind her manners. Eli only sat by the fire and let Clara pour hot coffee into his cup. Later, after Lily slept, Clara found him on the porch, looking toward the road where town lay hidden in darkness. I went through the letter again, he said. Clara stiffened. Why? You left it on the table. I did not invite. No, he said, turning quickly. I wasn't reading your words. I noticed the paper. It has Vale's store stamp on the corner. She frowned. I thought Mrs. Bell's office sent it. The envelope might be. But this paper came from Vale's hotel desk. He orders special paper with a lantern mark. Clara's hand went cold. Why would a hotel keeper's paper be used in a letter from Silas through an agency? That's what I don't know. The wind moved between them. Clara pulled the shawl tighter around herself, though she no longer had it. Eli saw and slipped out of the brown wool. "Here," he said. "You need it. So do you." For a moment, both held the shawl between them. The porch lantern flickered. His hand was work rough, hers needle rough. Their fingers did not touch, but Clara felt the nearness of them, like warmth from a stove. She let him drape the shawl around her shoulders. "You helped me without making me smaller," she said. Eli looked away toward the dark pasture. "I know what it is to have folks do kindness with one hand and hold you down with the other." "Who held you down?" "Debt, pride. Some men in town who smile when a poor rancher stays poor. Silas among them. Then why speak for me? It gave him reason to turn on you." Eli's mouth tightened. "A man who only does right when it costs nothing ain't worth much." Clara carried those words to bed with her. Over the next week, life settled into a rhythm so ordinary it felt almost holy. Clara rose before light. She helped Willa with bread, taught Lily letters, mended harness straps when Eli showed her how, and took over the accounts with a seriousness that made Willa say the numbers were finally afraid of someone. Eli brought in wood before she could ask. Clara set aside the thickest biscuit for him without saying so. He noticed and broke it in half for Lily. Lily noticed too, and began watching them with the secret satisfaction of a child arranging the world in her mind. Clara learned the ranch sounds. The pump handle squealed before water came. The barn door banged twice if the wind came from the west. Eli's boots on the porch had a steady drag at night when he was weary. She learned that he hummed one line of a hymn when working with horses and forgot the rest. She learned that he spoke to frightened animals the same way he spoke to wounded people. Low, patient, leaving room for trust. Eli learned things too. Clara touched every piece of bread before cutting it, as though measuring how to make it last. She flinched when men raised their voices, then forced herself still. She smiled most easily when Lily made mistakes. Never when she did things perfect. She could turn a worn cuff, stretch a stew, and make a child believe reading was a treasure map. At first, they were careful with each other. Careful in doorways, careful passing places, careful not to let gratitude turn into obligation. But care can become its own kind of courtship when two lonely people practice it long enough. One afternoon, a mare in the barn began laboring early. Eli came in calling for Willa, but Willa had gone to Mrs. Pike's place for herbs. Clara stood at once. "I helped a neighbor with foaling twice," she said. "This might be hard." "Then tell me what to do." In the barn, the air smelled of straw, sweat, and storm damp. The mare lay trembling, eyes rolling. Eli knelt near her head, murmuring. Clara tied back her sleeves and followed his instructions. It was messy, frightening work. The fall came wrong. One leg bent. Ali's face went grim. "We might lose them both," he said. "No," Clara answered, though she had no right to promise it. "Tell me again." He guided her hands. Together they worked through the long hour, Eli steadying the mare while Clara reached where her smaller hands could do what his could not. When the foal finally slid free into the straw, wet and shuddering, Lily clapped from the stall door and burst into tears. The mare lived, the foal lived. Clara sat back on her heels, shaking so hard, she laughed. Eli stared at her across the straw. There was blood on her sleeve, high in her hair, and a streak of dirt across her cheek. She looked nothing like the ruined bride Mercy Creek had mocked. She looked fierce. "You saved that foal," he said. "We saved it. I could not have done it alone." "Neither could I." The words hung there, larger than the barn. That night, Lily named the foal Button because, she said, he was small and ought to be sewn carefully onto the world. Clara laughed properly that time, and Eli's heart took the sound in like rain after drought. But secrets do not sleep simply because a house has grown warmer. The first letter came 3 days later. Eli found it tucked under the ranch gate, weighted with a stone. The envelope bore no name, but inside was a note written in a sharp hand. Send the woman back to town. She belongs to a contract not yet settled. Eli read it twice, then put it in his coat before Clara could see. That was his mistake. Not because he meant harm, but because secrecy has a smell and Clara knew it. What is wrong? She asked after supper. Nothing. She set down the cup she was drying. I have been lied to by better-dressed men than you, Eli Mercer. Do not start small and expect me not to notice. Willa coughed into her apron to hide a smile. Eli took the note from his pocket and handed it over. Clara read it. Her face did not change until she reached the word belongs. Then something in her eyes went flat. I belong to no contract. I know. Do you? Yes. She looked at him a long moment. Then why hide it? Because you'd already had enough fear. That was not yours to decide. He accepted the rebuke. You're right. The apology came fast and plain. It disarmed her more than any defense could have. She sat at the table. Silas said there was a dowry. There was none. The agency said he wanted a working wife. He says he wanted money. Now someone says there is a contract. All three cannot be true. Maybe none are, Eli said. Clara unfolded the original marriage letter beside the thread. The handwriting in the letter is different from Silas' signature at the bottom. Look, the words are narrow, pressed hard. The signature is loose. Eli leaned over the table. His shoulder nearly brushed hers. Vale writes narrow. You know his hand? He keeps half the town's debt notes. Willa's face darkened. That lantern-marked devil. Clara looked up. Why would Mr. Vale send for me? Eli was quiet. Tell me, she said. He sat opposite her. Silas Vane has been trying to buy my north pasture for 2 years. There's water under it. Good grazing. I refused. Then he got Vale to call in old debts. I held him off, but only just. Last month Silas told me a married man with a settled household might get better terms from the Cattle Association. Might be even a winter contract. He said unmarried men, raising children, looked unstable. Clara frowned. What has that to do with me? I don't know. Might be nothing. But she saw the shadow on his face say it. Eli rubbed both hands over his jaw. If Silas expected a bride with money, he could marry her, use the dowry, strengthen his business, and shame me besides. If the bride had no money, rejecting her in public still served him. It showed the town what happens to folks who arrive poor. Maybe he hoped I'd do exactly what I did. Why? To make me look improper. A single man, taking in a rejected male bride. Folks talk. Creditors listen. Church elders listen. Men who decide contracts listen. Clara pushed back from the table. Then I have harmed you by staying. No. Yes. Your kindness might cost you. Eli's voice firm. My choice might cost me. You are not the cost. She stood there, breathing hard, the paper in her hand. No man had ever separated her from the trouble around her so cleanly. She did not know what to do with it. I should leave in the morning, she said. Lily made a small sound from the bedroom doorway. None of them had known she was awake. Don't go, the child whispered. Clara turned. Lily stood barefoot, hair loose around her face. Sweetheart, if you go, Uncle Eli will eat burned biscuits again. Despite everything, Willa muttered. True as scripture. Lily ran to Clara and wrapped both arms around her waist. Clara froze, then slowly rested one hand on the child's hair. Eli looked away, giving them privacy as best a man could, in a small room. I will not leave before breakfast, Clara said finally. Lily held tighter. After breakfast, Clara met Eli's eyes over the child's head. I do not know. The next day was Sunday. Clara wanted to stay away from church, but Willa said absence would feed gossip better than presence. Eli hitched the wagon. Lily wore her red shawl. Clara put on her brown dress, brushed until the fabric lay as smooth as it could, and pinned her hair beneath her plain hat. At the churchyard, conversation thinned when they arrived. Silas stood near the steps with Mrs. Vale and the girl in blue, whose name Clara learned was Hattie Lorne, daughter of a dry goods merchant. Silas looked pleased to see them, which made Clara's stomach turn. The preacher, Reverend Amos Bell, greeted Eli with troubled kindness. "Morning, Mr. Mercer, Reverend." His wife, a round-faced woman with honest eyes, touched Clara's hand. "Miss Whitcomb, you are welcome." Those 4 words nearly carried Clara through the service. Nearly. After the final hymn, Silas stepped into the aisle before people could leave. "Reverend, since the matter concerns moral order in our community, I ask a moment." Eli stood slowly. "Silas." "No, let," Clara said, though her hands had gone cold. Silas faced the congregation. "A woman came here, under agreement to marry me. Upon discovering her misrepresentations, I refused. Since then, she has been residing at the ranch of an unmarried man, bringing question upon his household and his town." A rustle went through the pews. Clara felt each whisper like a finger pressed into a bruise. Eli said, "Careful." Silas smiled. "I am careful. I propose a proper solution. The woman can be returned to town under supervision until the agency retrieves her, or Mr. Mercer can make lawful what he has already made suspect." Lily clutched Clara's skirt. Eli's face hardened. "You do not get to shove a woman toward marriage because your own insult failed to satisfy you." Silas' eyes brightened. He had wanted anger, made poor men look dangerous. Clara stepped forward before Eli could say more. Her voice shook, but it carried. "I came to Mercy Creek by letter. I did not write that letter to myself. I did not invent a proposal, nor did I claim money I do not have. Mr. Vane refused me publicly. Mr. Mercer offered food, shelter, and work without demanding my hand or my silence. If that is a scandal, then the scandal is not in his house." Some of the women looked down. A few men shifted. Mrs. Vale snapped. "Bold words for a woman with no references." Clara turned to her. "You are right. I have no one here to speak for who I was before I came. But you have all had a week to see who Mr. Mercer is. If you doubt him so quickly, perhaps the fault is not mine." The church went still. Reverend Bell cleared his throat. "There will be no forced marriage spoken in this house. Miss Whitcomb may reside where she is safe, provided the household remains honorable." Silas' smile faded. Then Vale, the hotel keeper, stood near the back. "Safe is costly, Reverend. Debts are debts. Mr. Mercer owes my establishment $43.16. Payment is overdue. If he is feeding extra mouths, perhaps he can pay what he owes first." Eli tightened. He had known the debt existed. He had not known Vale would drag it into church. Clara felt the trap close. Kindness was no longer enough. Silas and Vale had moved from gossip to money, and money had teeth. After church, Eli loaded them into the wagon in silence. On the road home, Lily fell asleep against Clara's side. Willa muttered dark judgments under her breath. Eli drove as if every rein in his hand was a thought he could not loosen. At the ranch, he went straight to the barn. Clara followed. "You should have told me about the debt." He turned. "Which one?" The bitterness in that answer stopped her. "I have $2, she said. "Take it." "No." "Eli, no." His voice rose. Then he forced it down. "I will not take the last coins of a woman they tried to shame into the street. You let me work. Let me help with this too." "You are helping. Not enough." He laughed once without humor. "That is the song of this place. Never enough. Not enough calves, not enough hay, not enough money, not enough roof, not enough man. Clara stepped closer. Who told you that? He looked at her, breathing hard. She asked again, softer. Who told you that? My father, near the end when fever had him mean. Creditors, Silas, that girl who left, myself most days. The barn was quiet except for a button nosing at straw. Clara's anger changed shape. It became grief for him. You are enough to make a hungry woman a plate without asking what it buys you, she said. Enough to raise a child not born to you. Enough to stand in church when silence would have served you better. Do not let a man like Silas Vane decide the measure. Eli looked at her as though she had placed a hand on an old wound no one else knew was there. He said, I don't want you trapped by my troubles. I am already trapped by other men's lies. Your troubles at least have honest names. That evening, they spread every paper on the kitchen table. Clara examined Eli's debts, Val's notes, Silas' offers, and the letter that had brought her west. She noticed what Eli had missed. 3 debt notes had been renewed with fees he never agreed to. A supply charge had been added the week his father died, when Eli had been home and not in town. The signature on one receipt did not match Eli's hand. This is not only pressure, Clara said. This is theft dressed in ink. Eli stared at the papers. Can you prove it? Not alone. Who can? Someone with Vale's ledger. Willa leaned back. No one gets near that ledger. Clara's eyes moved to the window, toward the road to town. I might. Eli understood at once. No, I work for a lawyer. I know what to look for. No, you said I choose. I did. I also get to say walking into Val's hotel is dangerous. I am not made safer by ignorance. He had no answer ready for that, because it was true. In the end, the chance came not through bravery, but laundry. 2 days later, Mrs. Vale sent word through a boy that she required someone to mend table linens for the hotel before a cattle buyer's supper. She had heard, the message said, that Miss Whitcomb needed respectable employment. It was an insult wrapped as opportunity. Clara accepted. Eli hated it. Willa hated it louder. Lily asked if Clara would come back before bedtime, and Clara promised she would. At the hotel, Mrs. Vale set Clara near the back office with a basket of torn linens. The door to Val's accounts stood half open. Men came and went all afternoon. Clara sewed with her head bowed, listening. She heard Silas mention the north pasture. She heard Vale say, Mercer will fold by month's end. She heard Hattie Lauren laugh about the mail-order bride with no dowry. Then, near dusk, Vale left to greet a supplier. Mrs. Vale went upstairs. The office stood empty. Clara's heart pounded so hard, it seemed to shake the needle in her hand. She slipped inside. The ledger lay on the desk. She had only moments. She turned pages, scanning columns. Mercer, Mercer, Mercer. There it was. Charges added. Interest double. A note marked transferred to S. Vane upon default. Beneath it, another entry made her stop. Correspondence fee. Bride contract Whitcomb. Her breath caught. Vale had paid the agency, not Silas. Vale had arranged the letter. Silas' name had been bait, but Vale's money set the hook. Beside the fee was a note. Recover costs through Vane agreement or Mercer leverage. Clara copied the lines onto a scrap hidden in her sleeve. Then she heard footsteps. She barely reached the sewing chair before Mrs. Vale entered. The woman's eyes narrowed. You look pale. The lamp smoke is strong, Clara said. Mrs. Vale glanced toward the office. Is it? Clara kept sewing. When Eli arrived after dark, waiting in the alley as planned, Clara came out with the linens finished and the scrap pressed against her wrists. He helped her into the wagon, his face tight with worry. Did they trouble you? I see, said. And I found proof, but they did not make it home before trouble found them. A rider followed on the north road. Then another. Eli heard the hoofbeats and reached under the wagon seat for the old rifle he kept there. "Get down," he said. Clara pulled Lily's quilt from the back and crouched low, though fear clawed up her throat. The riders came alongside, scarves over their faces. One grabbed for the bridle. Eli swung the wagon hard, sending the man's horse sideways. The second rider reached toward Clara. Eli stood in the moving wagon and struck him with the rifle stock. The man fell hard into the dust. The horses screamed. The wagon lurched. Clara clung to the seat. "Eli." The first rider drew a pistol. Eli fired into the air, not at the man, but close enough that his horse reared and bolted. The rider cursed and vanished into the dock. For a moment there was only the wild breathing of horses. Eli climbed down, checked the road, then came back to Clara. "Are you hurt?" "No, are you?" He looked down, as if only then, noticing blood on his sleeve. "It's nothing. It is not nothing. It's a graze." She tore a strip from her petticoat without hesitation and bound his arm by lantern light, her hands shaking, only after the knot was tied. "They know," she said. "They know I copied it." "Then we ride to Reverend Bell tonight." "No," Clara said. "If we go now with one scrap, Vale will deny it and Silas will claim we stole. We need the ledger itself." Eli stared. "You nearly got dragged from a wagon, and you nearly got shot." "I am aware." "Clara, no. Listen to me. All my life men have decided when I am too weak for the truth. My father hid his debts until the house was gone. The agency hid the arrangement until I stood in dust. Silas hid his cruelty behind manners. Vale hid theft in columns. I will not hide now because I am afraid." Eli's face changed as she spoke. His fear remained, but respect rose beside it. "All right," he said. "Not alone." The sacrifice came the next morning. Eli rode to town before sunrise with his best horse, Juniper, the mare he had raised from a foal, and once refused to sell, even when his father needed medicine. He sold her to Marshall Griggs for less than she was worth, because cash in hand mattered more than pride. With that money, he paid Val's public demand in front of witnesses, every dollar and cent, and asked for a signed receipt. Val looked surprised, then irritated. "Found money, Mercer, sold something I love," Eli said. "Men do that when the people under their roof are threatened." Silas, standing nearby, said, "A horse will not save your ranch." "No," Eli replied. "But truth might." While the men watched Eli, Willa entered the hotel kitchen with 2 baskets of eggs and a tongue sharp enough to hold Mrs. Vale occupied. Clara slipped in behind her carrying folded linens. She went straight to the office where the ledger had been moved into a locked cabinet. But Lily, who had been told to stay at Mrs. Pike's and had not obeyed, appeared at the side window holding up a key ring. Clara nearly fainted from fright. "Lily Mercer." They were hanging by the pantry. Lily whispered, "I was careful. This is not a game, I know. They hurt Uncle Eli." There was no time to scold her properly. Clara unlocked the cabinet, took the ledger, and replaced it with an old hotel register of similar size. She wrapped the ledger in linens and carried it out through the kitchen, while Willa spilled eggs across the floor with theatrical outrage. By noon, the ledger lay on Reverend Bell's table. By 1 o'clock, Marshall Griggs had been called. By 2, half of Mercy Creek knew something was coming, though no one yet knew what. Silas tried to leave town at 3. Eli stopped him at the livery. He did not draw a gun. He did not raise a fist. He stood in the doorway, poor coat, bandaged arm, dust on his boots, and said, "You will stay." Silas sneered. "Or what? Or every man here will know you run faster from ink than bullets." Men turned. The livery owner stepped from a stall. Marshall Griggs arrived with the ledger under one arm. They gathered in the church because it was the only building large enough to hold the crowd and the shame. that had to be answered. Reverend Bell stood at the front, grave and pale. Marshal Griggs read the entries aloud. False charges against Eli Mercer. Fees added without agreement. Transfer of debt to Silas Vane. If the North Pasture went into default. Payment to the correspondence office for Clara Whitcomb. A note suggesting her rejection could be used to cast doubt on Eli's household. If he took her in, Mrs. Vale began crying before her husband was named. Vale shouted that the ledger was stolen. Marshal Griggs said stolen. Evidence was still evidence when it proved a greater crime. And besides, he had a warrant now and 2 witnesses to threats on the road. Silas stood red-faced, but the town was no longer looking at Clara. They were looking at him. Hattie Lorne slipped out the side door. Then Reverend Bell turned to Clara. "Miss Whitcomb, do you wish to speak?" A week earlier, the question would have terrified her. Now she looked at Eli, at Willa, at Lily sitting with both fists in her lap, at Mrs. Pike nodding from the second pew. Clara stood. "I came here because a letter told me I was wanted," she said. "When I arrived, I was rejected for being poor. Many of you saw that. Some of you laughed. Some looked away. One man asked whether I had eaten." Eli lowered his eyes. "I thought shame was something a person carried alone," Clara continued. "But I have learned this week that shame can be handed back to the people who earned it. I did not lie. I did not trap Mr. Vane. I did not bring dishonor to the Mercer Ranch. I worked there. I ate there. I was safe there. A child trusted me there. And if this town must judge a woman by the man who first refused her, then it will never know her at all." No one spoke. Then Mrs. Pike stood. "I'll give Miss Whitcomb work any time." The blacksmith stood next. "Mercer never cheated me." A ranch wife, Rose, face flushed. "I laughed that day. I am sorry." The apology moved through Clara like pain and balm together. It did not erase what had happened. Nothing could, but it placed the blame where it belonged. Silas tried one last time. "You all think Mercer is noble. Ask him why he keeps her. Ask him if he has not considered marrying her now that pity has made him look grand." Eli rose so slowly that the pew creaked beneath his hand. "I have considered marrying Clara Whitcomb," he said. The church went breathless. Clara turned to him, stunned. Eli looked only at her. "Not because she needs saving. Not because the town talks. Not because a man like you tried to dirty her name. I have considered because she is brave and steady and kind when kindness has cost her. Because my house is warmer with her in it. Because Lily smiles more. Because she saw my broken accounts and my broken pride and did not turn away from either." Clara's eyes filled. Eli's voice roughened. "But I would not ask while she owed me gratitude. I would not ask while she had nowhere else to go. I would not ask in a room full of people, trying to force her answer. So hear me plain, Silas. I will not use shame to get a wife. That is your kind of manhood, not mine." The silence after that was different from the one on the day Clara arrived. That silence had been hungry. This one was humble. Clara stood facing him. The whole town faded to boards, lamplight, and breath. "You sold juniper," she said softly. Eli blinked, not expecting those words. "Yes, for the receipt, for time, for truth. That horse mattered to you. So do you." It was not a confession shouted under stars. It was not a kiss stolen before applause. It was better. It was a simple statement laid in public where no one could twist it. Clara stepped toward him. "I cannot answer a proposal you have not made," she said. A tremble touched her mouth. "But when you do ask me at the ranch. Ask me where I am free to say yes because I choose it, not because anyone is watching." For the first time since she arrived in Mercy Creek, people smiled without cruelty. Eli nodded, and the look in his eyes was bright enough to hurt. "I can do that." Vale was arrested before sundown. Silas Vane lost more than reputation. The Cattle Association withdrew from his winter contract, and men who had feared him began bringing their debt notes to Marshal Griggs. Some would take months to untangle, some would never be fully repaired. But the whole Silas and veil had over Mercy Creek cracked that day, and cracks let in light. Eli's debt did not vanish, but the false charges did. The North Pasture stayed Mercer land. Mrs. Pike extended fair credit. The blacksmith repaired Ali's wagon wheel for half price, and grumbled that he should have done it sooner. Reverend Bell's wife brought Lily a ribbon, and Clara a length of blue cloth, saying only, "For when want something that is yours, my joy and not need." Clara cried over that cloth in private. Spring came slowly, with mud first, then green. The ranch did not become rich. Stories that turned poverty into gold by supper are lies told by people who never counted flour. The Mercer Ranch still needed rails, seed, repairs, and hard hands. But it changed. Clara set the accounts right and found enough savings in honest buying to keep coffee in the tin. Willa taught her how to judge rain by the smell of the wind. Eli taught her to ride a patient gray mare named Sunday, and only laughed once when she slid sideways into the hay. Lily learned to read full verses from the family Bible and insisted on reading to Button, who did not improve but listened kindly. Clara wrote to the woman in Kansas City and repaid the shawl money with interest. She also wrote to Mrs. Bell's correspondence office, enclosing copies of the ledger pages. Months later, a reply came saying the clerk who had handled her match had been dismissed, and other women's contracts would be reviewed. It was not enough, but it was something. One evening, after the first warm day of the year, Eli asked Clara to walk to the rise above the creek. The sun was setting white and gold. Below them, the house glowed with lamplight. Willa's shadow moved in the kitchen window. Lily's laughter drifted up from the yard where she was trying to teach Button to follow a ribbon. On the rise stood 3 graves marked with simple stone. Ellie's father, his mother, and Ruth. Clara had been there before, but never with Eli at dusk. He took off his hat. "I wanted them to know you proper." Clara stood beside him, hands folded. "Do you think they would approve? My mother would ask if you can make pie." "I can." "My father would ask if you understand cattle." "I am learning." Ruth would ask if Lily loves you. Clara looked down at the child running in the yard. "I love her." Eli turned to her then. The prairie wind moved gently, lifting a strand of hair at her cheek. She was not wearing the brown dress from the day she arrived. She had made a new one from the blue cloth, plain but bright, with tiny stitches even Willa admired. On her face the old caution remained, but it no longer ruled her. She had become like the ranch itself, weathered, working, alive. Eli reached into his coat and took out the torn marriage letter. Clara's breath caught. "Why do you have that?" "You left it in the account book." "I thought about burning it, but it wasn't mine to burn." He held it out. She looked at the paper that had carried her humiliation west. For a long time, she did not touch it. Then she took it, tore it once, twice, and let the pieces go. The wind lifted them over the grass. "I was so ashamed," she whispered. "I know. I thought being unwanted in public would be the end of me." "It wasn't." "No." She looked at him. "It was the road to your wagon." Eli's eyes shone. He swallowed, then went down on one knee in the grass. Clara covered her mouth. "Clara Whitcomb," he said, voice unsteady but clear. "I am a poor rancher. I have more repairs than money, more stubborn cattle than sense, and a little girl who already thinks you hung the moon. I cannot promise ease. I cannot promise fine things. I can promise a roof I will mend before rain reaches you. I can promise food shared fair, work shared honest, and your name defended whether you stand beside me or not. I can promise that no letter, no debt, no man's pride will decide your place in my home. If you choose it, I would be honored to be your husband." Clara could not answer at once, not because she doubted, because the answer was too large for the wounded place inside her that had once been told to expect crumbs. At last she held out both hands. Eli rose and took them. "Yes," she said. "Not because I need shelter, not because I owe you, because I have watched you choose good when good cost you, because you never made my hunger a chain, because your home became the first place where I could breathe. Yes, Eli Mercer, I choose you." He bowed his head over her hands, and only then did she step close enough for him to kiss her. It was gentle, almost careful, but it carried every meal shared, every wound bound, every cold night made warmer by trust. Their wedding took place 3 weeks later outside the little church, under a sky washed clean by rain. Clara walked not from the hotel porch, not from the depot platform, but from Eli's wagon, with Lily holding one hand and Willa fussing behind her veil. Mrs. Pike had baked 2 cakes. The blacksmith played fiddle badly and with great confidence. Reverend Bell's wife cried before the vows began. Silas Vane did not attend. No one missed him. When Reverend Bell asked who gave the bride, Clara lifted her chin. "I give myself," she said. A murmur moved through the crowd. Warm this time. Bayless' smile trembled. They spoke their vows plainly. No grand speeches, no polished promises. Just faithfulness, shelter, labor, patience, and love. When Eli placed the ring on Clara's finger, it was not gold. It had been Ruth's simple silver band, resized by the blacksmith and polished until it caught the sun. Clara touched it as though it were a crown. After the ceremony, they walked down the church steps together. A year earlier, Clara might have thought honor meant never being seen in weakness. Now, she knew better. Honor was being seen truly and still held with respect. At the edge of the yard, near the place where she had once stood, rejected with her trunk in the dust, Eli stopped. People turned to watch. He offered his arm. Clara looked at it, then at the street that had witnessed her shame. Slowly, she placed her hand on his sleeve. It was a small gesture, a public one, a vow beyond a vow. Lily ran ahead scattering wildflowers instead of petals because she had picked them herself and refused to let anyone arrange them properly. Willa called for everyone to eat before the cakes melted. Church bells rang over Mercy Creek, clear and bright. And this time the sound did not chase Clara out of town. It welcomed her home. That evening, when the guests had gone and the sun lowered behind a ridge, Eli drove his wife back to the ranch. Flour sacks rested in the wagon bed, along with coffee, nails, lamp oil, and a new blue ribbon for Lily. Clara leaned beside him, her shoulder touching his, no longer careful of being seen. The house waited with lanterns in the windows. Smoke rose from the chimney. The creek caught the last gold of day. Lily stood on the porch in her red shawl, waving both arms, while Willa pretended not to wipe her eyes. Eli stopped the wagon by the steps. Clara looked at the poor ranch house, the patched barn, the cottonwoods, the child, the old woman, the man beside her. Nothing about it was grand. Everything about it was hers by choice. Eli climbed down and reached up for her. She took his hand. This time, she did not need rescuing from the wagon. She stepped down into the yard as Mrs. Clara Mercer, a rejected bride no longer rejected, a woman sent by a cruel letter and received by a kind heart, standing in the lantern glow of a home, built not from wealth or pride, but from bread shared, names defended, debts faced, and love proven, one quiet sacrifice at a time.